Hello and welcome back to the Roundup by News of the Week, the show where I, Jake Whitwell, summarise and explain the news, helping you to stay informed. I've tried a new angle this week because I kind of got bored of this one. To get through this week, the key things that we'll cover are possible migration reforms in the UK, trade deals made by the UK, and the developing situation between Pakistan and India. Firstly, in news on policy change, HuffPost noted Downing Street has ruled out a U-turn on a decision to axe winter fuel payments. There's been reports recently that Labour have been considering increasing the threshold where people will lose access to their winter fuel payments, but it's been put down by ministers, and multiple sources claimed that there's no review into the policy and that nothing will be changed. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said he was not aware of any review as well. The Independent detailed the government is planning to limit visa applications for certain nationalities. The UK government is apparently planning to restrict applications from certain countries deemed to be more likely to overstay or abuse the asylum system. Applicants from Pakistan, Nigeria and Sri Lanka are thought to be some of the countries being targeted. The Home Office has said that it's building intelligence over people most likely to abuse the system, and it will act accordingly in stopping that abuse. The Independent also covered more news about the migration reforms that should be coming this next week, with one policy expected to be that migrants must speak English or must be fluent in English to be able to work in the UK. People applying to the UK for a visa are reportedly have to demonstrate that they can speak English to an A-level standard, which is upping the requirement from what is currently a GCSE standard. They'll also have to express the ability to write detailed texts and on complex subjects as well. A spokesperson for the PM has said the paper, released hopefully tomorrow, will set out a bold package of measures to tackle the root causes of migration and help migrants integrate. The Independent note that the UK has agreed a trade deal with India, which will slash tariffs on cars, whiskey, and food exports. The deal brings a reduction on tariffs to UK products like cars, whiskey, and food, as already stated. It would also lower the tariffs on Indian exports to the UK. Keir Starmer said the deal will strengthen the UK economy, eventually putting more money into people's pockets. Through a landmark deal with India, which will grow the economy faster. The Indian PM, Modi, said that called the deal a historic milestone, which was ambitious and mutually beneficial to both countries, as it would increase trade, growth, and job creation in both countries. Modi also said he would invite Starmer to India soon, and in terms of outcomes, the deal was thought to add $4.8 billion to the GDP, $2.2 billion in wages, and $25.5 billion in bilateral trade from each year from 2040. So it sounds like there's going to be a bit of a delayed impact there as well. The chief exec of the Confederation of British Industry, the CBI, Rain Newton-Smith, said the trade deal was a beacon of hope amidst a spectre of protectionism. In more confusing news, the Independent also covered a UK-US trade deal with Trump slashing tariffs on UK steel and cars. I used an article from Sky News to help me explain this, so I'll give a go at explaining it myself. Trump has avowed a trade deal with the UK, saying it has a great honour to have the UK as its first announcement. He said the agreement will be full and comprehensive, which will cement the relationship between the UK and the USA for years to come. Starmer vowed to deliver security for Britain, but said he would always act in the national interest. It's thought the deal will be a coup for the UK, but details haven't been released yet in terms of what trade deal is actually affected. This is where I got confused. It's been described as a heads of terms deal by Sky's business correspondent Paul Kelso, which is basically a preliminary deal which outlines terms for an upcoming deal prior to it all being agreed. It's thought that it would include lower tariffs on steel and cars, which is where the headline comes from, but as noted, the major terms have not yet been agreed. Jonathan Portes, a professor of economics and public policy at King's College London, said the deal will be damage limitation, though, rather than an economic boost, because it is not offsetting the tariffs placed on the UK completely. And the Independent also covered, this is an Independent show today apparently, but they covered comments from the chief negotiator, who said the government will consider sensible youth mobility proposals. Nick Thomas Simmons, the chief negotiator to the EU, said a scheme which would allow UK citizens to study and work in Europe and vice versa for EU students would be mutually beneficial and would benefit British youths. Well, its full sensible proposals could involve caps, as we've already reported, but of course, ministers previously were accused of ruling out this youth mobility scheme. Reuters reported on comments from the Creative Industries Minister Chris Bryant, who said the UK is in active talks with the USA over movie tariffs. Said the government was in active discussions with the USA to protect the UK's beating creative industries. It's unclear how tariffs will be imposed and what the timescale for them is in terms of movie tariffs on the UK, but it will be concerning because there was $5.91 billion spent in UK creative industries last year. Al Jazeera noted UK arms exports to Israel are set to continue despite a licence suspension. A joint report from the Palestinian Youth Movement and Progressive International and Workers for a Free Palestine revealed the UK has sent over 1,500 separate munitions since the suspension of arms licences last year. 29 export licences were ended out of the 350. Foreign Secretary David Lammy and Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds reportedly said at the time that the direct supply of 5 fighters to Israel had ended. It was claimed the remaining licenses cover things like helmets and goggles and other similar items, with many being withdrawn, as the government found there is clear risk that other licenses might be used to commit or facilitate violations of human rights. However, it's been claimed now that components of the F-35 fighter jets were still being shipped after licenses ended in 2024, and in some cases that these shipments were ongoing. This has led others to claim that the UK Parliament has been misled since about the extent of continuing exports and specifically what is being exported. On this though, Al Jazeera was told the vast majority of continuing licenses are not for the IDF, they are for civilian purposes or to be re-exported afterwards. Furthermore, they were told licenses relevant to the facilitation or committing of war crimes were suspended. The security minister added that any suggestion the UK is licensing other weapons for use by Israel aside from F-35 components due to its role in NATO were misleading. Moving on to global news then, I first have some news on the India and Pakistan situation. Times noted that India and Pakistan moved closer to war at the start of the week with a wave of new strikes. Both countries accused each other of targeting military air bases, and both countries released statements saying that the strikes have been launched against the other one, with some of these being intercepted. The US Secretary of State Mark Rubio urged both sides to re-establish communication to avoid future miscalculations. He also offered US assistance in brokering constructive talks to prevent future conflicts. G7 countries also called for maximum restraint from both sides, while China, which controls part of the Kashmir region, said that it was concerned as well. LBC noted Pakistan has claimed to have killed 50 soldiers near the border with Kashmir in its retaliation to Indian strikes. This came from the Pakistani Information Minister, who commented on the wider strikes and on Indian military installations. The Independent detailed misinformation has flooded Indian and Pakistani social media after an absence of official updates. Mislabeled videos, recycled images, and fake public advisories have been posted online, with fact checkers, government agencies, and digital forensics working near tirelessly to debunk them. Several news channels and journalists also have fallen for the fakes, using them in their reporting. The Times covered the situation between India and Pakistan as of Saturday, so last night, and a ceasefire was agreed yesterday, but mere hours later it was threatened with further strikes. Both countries blamed each other for the resumption in strikes, and said they were conducting retaliatory strikes. This comes after leaders and officials from other countries like the USA, UK and China, as we just talked about, have offered support and tried to de-escalate things. In news on Ukraine then, BBC News detailed Ukraine has labelled Russia's ceasefire a farce after reports of hundreds of violations. Ukraine's foreign minister accused Russia of 734 violations of its ceasefire since it came into effect on Thursday. Russia's defence ministry has accused Ukraine of 488 violations in return, and one was killed in Ukraine following Russia's strikes. Reuters noted that Trump has called for a 30-day ceasefire and has warned of more sanctions. Trump has called for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, which Ukraine seems ready to accept, but Russia doesn't seem so eager. Trump said that if a 30-day ceasefire is not respected by both sides, then the US will impose further sanctions. ITV News detailed the UK has announced new tariffs on Russia ahead of a military coalition meeting. Starmer announced new tariffs on Russia, which will target vessels carrying more than $24 billion of US cargo since the start of the year. Trump said it will put pressure on Moscow to work towards a peace deal, Ukraine, and a step towards UK prosperity. Reuters noted Ukraine's Zelensky has called on Russia to confirm ceasefire talks. Zelensky called on Russia to accept an unconditional ceasefire that would begin on May 12th, so tomorrow. He said it would then meet for direct talks over negotiations to end the war. Also, The Independent detailed Israeli airstrikes have killed 23 in Gaza amid an outcry over an aid blockade. The health officials in the region have said the people have been killed after tents were caught in strikes. The UN and trade groups have rejected Israel's aid distribution scheme, while strikes reportedly targeted warehouses owned by refugee agencies. Aid groups are now warning, as they have been for a few weeks, that food is running out. Israel's justification for this is that Hamas is siphoning off aid, and in doing so, stopping it is pressuring Hamas into releasing its remaining hostages. In news on stats and trends then, the Guardian noted a report has found Britain has one of the most difficult voter registration processes in the world. The report was conducted across 62 liberal democracies and found that the UK is a real outlier internationally, according to academics from the University of Manchester. Requirements like having to actually register to vote, meet deadlines before polling day, and cast ballots at specific places contribute to this. The UK was amongst other countries in difficulty, like Ireland and Barbados. The Guardian also detailed that disability benefit cuts are going to hit 700,000 people already in poverty, and that's according to analysis undertaken by the Department for Work and Pensions. On top of the 250,000 people being drawn into poverty by the measure, 700,000 families who are already in relative poverty, but when housing costs are taken into control, would also be affected. This has caused backlash from campaign groups, but it does not take into account the £1 billion Labour are going to spend, or say they're going to spend, on helping people back into work. So there's going to be an argument that it can be mitigated by that measure, and to the extent we don't know. The Times noted that the cost of housing asylum seekers has tripled as small boat crossings have been rising. The National Audit Office has found that the cost of 10-year contracts with private providers for asylum seeker housing would cost an estimated £15.3 billion. The Home Office originally thought that would cost around £4.5 billion from 2019 to 2029, so it will be over triple the cost of what they originally thought in 2029. While only 35% of asylum seekers live in hotels, that makes up three-quarters of the overall cost of asylum accommodation. The Telegraph detailed public sector productivity has worsened despite huge pay rises. Activity fell by 0.3% in 2024 from ONS figures, which itself was followed a decline of 0.2% in 2023. This comes not only as productivity was 4.6% lower than it was pre-COVID figures, and as Labour's pay rises were already critiqued for there being no strings attached. Critics said that this would lead to worse productivity at the time, and the Shadow Business Secretary has said the figures were not a surprise and that people and businesses will rightly expect more for their tax money. In non-political news, BBC News noted that Pope Leo XIV has called the church a beacon of light to illuminate the darkness in his first mass. He warned that people were turning away from faith to technology, money, success and power, or pleasure. He said that a lack of faith was accompanied by a loss of meaning of life and other things like the neglect of mercy, violations of human rights or dignity, and the family crisis. BBC News also detailed that 2 porn sites have been investigated for the suspected failing of age checks. Com has launched 2 investigations into 2 porn sites believed to be breaking new child safety rules. I think it's IT Tech and IT Tech Limited that operates a nudifying site, and Score Internet Group LLC have failed to outline how they are preventing children from accessing their platforms. The violations seem to be over the lack of any effective age checking mechanisms on their website. Neither company provided the information to the BBC, not BBC, to the regulators Ofcoms, request information when they were asked to do so. And that concludes all the news I got this week, so thank you very much for listening or watching. Please, if you like this, consider liking or subscribing, and if you thought there was anything I missed, please put it in the comments below. Bye, have a good week.